Hi, I'm Alan Ross. I'm the managing editor of APC Media. This is DISTRIBUTECH International 2024 Interviews with Thought Leaders. Enjoy. So my next guest is Scott Harden. Scott is the Chief Technology Officer of Schneider Electric, Chief Technology Officer and Innovation.
For innovation.
For innovation. We're going to talk about that. Okay?
We are.
So you've been in the industry about 20 years. Tell me how you got in the industry, a little bit about your journey up until now.
Yeah. It's a pretty interesting trajectory.
Okay.
I've always been a technologist. I started my career in consulting. I was focused on enterprise information management systems.
Okay.
And coincidentally, it landed me in a role with a big utility in Canada called BC Hydro. And I was involved with
BC Hydro.
BC Hydro and their smart metering program that started about 20 years ago. And so I was involved with, I was a team of leading a team of architects that were actually responsible for coming up with the overall system design for this.
Were you an architect?
I was a technical architect, solutions architect to be specific, back when I was in that role at that time. But that's really where I got started with this. But I was so fascinated by what was happening in regards to grid modernization. It was a fascinating project that I was part of. And even if you look at what BC Hydro did, many would look at that as an AMI program, but it really wasn't.
Oh, yeah, right.
It was an analytics program.
BC Hydro was one of the most advanced utilities that was doing things. I remember that from I grew up in Canada.
Okay.
So I knew it there, but I didn't know them at the time.
Yeah.
When I got in my career, I just got to know them there. But now it's about your trajectory. Keep going.
Yeah. So at that point in time, I'm in the industry and became very passionate about what I was doing. So I spent the next 10 years in consulting. I joined a software company called Bits2 Systems that actually originated out of the same program at BC Hydro. Company was ultimately acquired by GE. I went back into consulting because I was much more interested in working with additional utility customers and ultimately landed a role at Microsoft. And so at Microsoft, I was Chief Technology Officer for Energy and Sustainability.
Wow. Okay. Good.
Yeah. And so 2 years there. And so you're maybe starting to see a little bit of a theme here.
Yeah.
But I have kind of always straddled two sides to my role, the industry side as well as the technology side, really kind of focusing on how we bring these things together.
Yeah.
Right? So at Microsoft, I was working with largest energy customers globally for Microsoft. I was working with the largest partners, which is ultimately how I met Schneider Electric.
Okay.
And I was also working with Microsoft Engineering. And Microsoft, was keenly interested in what the role their products would play in the energy industry, and more importantly, what role their products would play in the energy transition. And so I actually met Microsoft for that role here at DISTRIBUTECH.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Fascinating when I look back at that.
Because here we're at DISTRIBUTECH, and I know any major power conference, you see Microsoft at. And the first time I saw that, I thought, what are they doing here?
Why are they here?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But they're helping build the backbone. Continue. You just got with Schneider. How long ago was that?
So I just joined Schneider 2 years ago.
Okay.
And in Schneider terms, that's a very short amount of time. I've met so many people there that have been there 30 years sometimes. Really impressive company. So in my role at Schneider, as CTO for innovation, I'm responsible for really two key things in the company. One is essentially looking across our technology strategy and how that applies to our innovation agenda. And so you hear Schneider talk a lot about what we see as like electricity 4.0, which means essentially coupling digital with electrification, right? For sustainable outcomes. My scope is really to look at what is the technology strategy that the company needs to focus on as we make investments and as we progress with what our role is to essentially become the leading technology company when it comes to energy transition.
So when I think of Schneider, the first thing I think of is power quality.
Yeah.
You're talking about another whole, you're in a different world when you talk about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But we'll end up with that because I do want to talk more about how Schneider's going to do that.
Yeah.
You've been in the industry long enough now to have seen the trajectory, and it's like the hockey stick is beginning to change, but we have not seen the change that's coming, right? So talk a little bit about, from where we are now to the future. What do you see as changes in the industry?
And perhaps what I can help with is the other side of my role.
Okay.
And so the other side of my role is really what we would call essentially software R&D.
Okay.
Software R&D within innovation. If you had just quick how Schneider is set up, essentially we have 3 pillars in the business. We have energy management. That's our traditional, everything from power products to what we do with building systems. We have industrial automation, and then we have innovation. And innovation is responsible for our growth opportunities. And so SE Ventures sits within innovation, partnerships such as Microsoft sits within innovation, and then also our largest essentially incubations, and one of which is what we call our prosumer business. And so here is where I'm going to kind of get to your question, because I want to answer that one, and I want to give you a little bit of visibility into how we think of that problem, right? We have our traditional hardware solutions, right, that focus on power quality, and this is what Schneider has been known for. But there are a lot of different software applications that are also going to be absolutely critical when it comes to being able to handle power quality needs as you move into this highly distributed system, right? And so our prosumer business is kind of coupled with a few different things. We have a hardware part to our prosumer business, which includes microgrid solutions for commercial and industrial customers, as well as residential solutions where we're kind of scaling down a microgrid and taking it down to the home level, right? Providing integrated home solutions. And then we have software businesses. One software group is focused on consumer adoption, and the other, and probably the most critical from my perspective, is our utility group. And this is where we have made investments in Uplight, in AutoGrid, as well as our digital grid business. And so when it comes to how we think about power quality today, we really think about the needs of a distributed system and the direction that this industry is headed for energy transition. We have to optimize from the grid to the prosumer. And that optimization includes power quality as well.
So we're getting more DER. Okay, so we're getting all of this wind and solar coming in. An inverter-based system, because I grew up in this industry with a transformer-based system. Suddenly you're in an inverter-based system. Everything is changing. The assets that are the transformers and breakers and relays, they're degrading faster with this inverter-based system. It also introduces more harmonics and transients into the system, which are going to end up somewhere, right? So the idea that at the prosumer level, which I love, because I think our industry's gone from ratepayers. They're ratepayers. You deal with the state governments. Now went to consumers. Oh, they consume, and we just treat them like now they're prosumers. They're selling us stuff, and we're buying stuff. It's getting to be, I call it the Wild West. And so Schneider, with innovation, is trying to capture the Wild West. Is that a good way to look at it?
I would think that we are looking to partner to expand into the Wild West. And so we have some very unique partnerships. In fact, we just announced a partnership with Itron. And who would have seen that 3 years ago? Partnering with Itron. And yet there are so many synergies as we think about how we solve for this system that is going to extend well beyond the meter. Right? They're responsible for that inflection point. We have a lot of work that's happening behind the meter, right? VPP capabilities from AutoGrid, the work that we're doing with Uplight with demand response. We also have efficiency applications, right, that manage buildings that sit behind the meter, and then we have our grid business that sits in front of the meter, right? And so from our perspective, a partnership like that is going to be quite essential. Now, as we think of power quality, to go back to where you were, and we're thinking of an inverter-based system, right? It all goes back to what I mentioned earlier around orchestration or optimization. I've actually been part of a trade association called Grid Forward, and now I'm part of SEPA on the board there. And there was a topic that came up out of one of the original ARA programs, the Pacific Northwest Smart Grid Demonstration Project. I don't know if you remember this program or not.
No.
What was fascinating that came out of that was the study around transactive controls and transactive energy. Right? I think that is finally being realized, because I think that transactive energy in the terms of peer-to-peer, as we talked about that back then, may not necessarily play out. But what will play out is essentially a multi-directional system that requires an immense amount of orchestration. And so this is where, when we think about power quality now, not only do we need to solve for the inertia issues, right, that are going to be on a system that's inverter-based, but we also have to solve for power quality concerns as you're harnessing essentially millions of contributing assets or resources that are coming from the demand side of the equation.
Transactive energy, the exchange of energy at the demand side is scary to a lot of utilities, and it's just because it's now we've got to be responsible for that. but we don't control it.
Yes.
The marketplace controls it, and other people control
But it's
it.
coming.
Yeah, it's coming. Change. I want to, I want to go off topic a little bit.
Yeah.
You obviously have been very comfortable with change in your career. You haven't had to adapt to change. You're the one that causes the change. There's an old book about who ate my cheese.
Yeah.
Well, you did.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You ate the cheese and had them to work through the thing. Talk a little bit about your experience with a very stable industry and how they've had to adapt to change at every level.
Yeah, kicking and screaming, kind of.
I'm glad you said that, because if you didn't, I was going to.
Yeah, no, but I think that they're starting to embrace that change.
Okay.
You know, one example that I like to talk about quite a lot, because I can draw off of my experiences on Microsoft and at Schneider, is just how disruptive the cloud is becoming, right? And not in a bad way.
Okay.
Right? But if you think about, now back to what I said earlier around transactive energy, you're going to have a system that is going to have to have autonomous operation. It's just not possible to deal with a system that is that complex. But now you're talking about computational requirements that are well in excess of any data center that a utility has. And so the cloud plays a key role. And that was what we talked about a lot at Microsoft, is going to be what is going to be the role of the cloud, and how do we work with the utilities, and how do we work with the providers like Schneider, right? Yeah. And I think that, cloud is finally truly becoming adopted. And I think it's only a matter of time before utilities and the regulators, even like NERC, will start to consider that cloud is a viable resource when it comes to control systems, perhaps, right? Yeah. So to me, that's an area, just a good example about disruption. Now, how are utilities thinking about this? We just recently announced a lighthouse partnership with PG&E and Microsoft. Okay. And the three of us working together have deployed the first cloud-native DERMS application in PG&E service territory. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And so what we are looking to do is essentially help navigate through these disruptive waters of change with the utility by having them actually as our partner in the innovation rhythms, right? And so we're super excited about that.
So I want, we're not going to do it now, but I'm recording this, so I want to do I'd love to do a showcase where we have somebody from all three of those to talk about that. Yeah. Because when we take things like that, and I love the fact that it's big organizations working together with no one having the one solution. Yeah. So you got Microsoft, you got Schneider, and you've got PG&E solving a pretty major problem. And I think that's what we at APC Media, what we want to bring is the stories that are changing the industry. Yeah. So that kicking and screaming thing changes to a reluctant okay, right? A reluctant okay. Last but not least, you kind of mentioned a little bit about Schneider and the partnerships. Talk specifically about where you think your role is going to take Schneider as the Chief Technology Officer Innovation.
Yeah. I think there's a few things that I can talk about, that where I really hope to create impact.
Talk about things that you're not going to have to kill me after you tell me. Right? Things you can talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Schneider is a wonderful place, and it's a lot of people that have a real clear shared ambition towards the energy transition, right? To deliver on the promise of clean energy for everyone. And I think that Schneider has done a fantastic job at identifying some disruptive technologies like AutoGrid that I talked about, and others that are essentially the foundational bricks, right? I think that where we will continue to progress and where you'll start to see things come out of our R&D strategy is how we now start to bring all of these things together, right? And this is where there's going to be some that are by way of partnerships like I talked about with Microsoft. It's also going to be within our portfolio. And if you think about, how do you help a data-driven economy when you have a utility that is truly going to become data-driven? Well, you break down the silos between the different applications that you have, right? And so as we look across our portfolio and we think about what we have in digital grids, such as our ADMS or our DERMS, sharing information across these applications is going to be critical. So how do we do that? Well, we think about some other assets in our portfolio, such as the Pi data infrastructure. The majority of utilities worldwide, utilize Pi as a system of record, right? we need to leverage that because it's going to be absolutely essential to have a data system like that as we progress into this new energy landscape, right? And so I think that when it comes to the impact that I hope to offer, my role is to really start to kind of bring all of these capabilities together in a more unified way.
Excellent. And another, you mentioned this, digital, you mentioned resilience, you mentioned reliability, autonomous, and the one thing that I think I clearly got from your discussion here is the world is changing much more rapidly than any one organization can handle. And so as we open up a little bit more, and that's what I'm seeing in this industry, people opening up to other organizations as opposed to saying we have all solutions and all things. Not going to happen in this industry.
Not at all.
I've seen some of the big boys, Siemens Energy, GE Vernova, Hitachi Energy, even they are saying, okay, we don't have all the solutions. Although I think they like to think in their portfolio they do. I'm glad to see that Schneider's taking a role in this. It's a very well-respected company, does a great job in the industry. And as I say, you're the power quality guys, but now you're not, you're more. Thank you so much, Scott.
Appreciate the conversation.